Tonight, a continued push by Republicans to change how we vote in Texas elections.
We're able to get millions of matches from other states and see as people move to come to Texas.
Why some experts say a plan to withdraw from a national voter roll program could lead to more voter fraud. Plus, expanding health care for dreamers. A new White House plan could cover hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients without insurance.
Probably can guess reasonably is that they don't agree about the right handling of this case right now.
And later, the clock is ticking for the Supreme Court to decide the fate of a widely used abortion pill. What does the 48-hour delay mean? Capitol Tonight starts right now. Thanks for joining us here on Capitol Tonight. I'm Karina Kling. You know how most of you have been able to vote at any polling site on Election Day? Well, that could be going away. The Texas Senate voted along party lines today to require all Texans to have to vote at their home precinct. 89 counties currently use countywide voting, including all of the largest ones. Republicans say countywide voting increases vulnerabilities in election security, but Democrats and voting rights groups say it's an attempt to make it harder to vote, especially in the large urban areas which tend to lean Democratic. Meanwhile, in the Texas House, the Elections Committee heard a bill today that would withdraw the state from the Electronic Registration Information Center. 31 states and the District of Columbia are members of what's known as ERIC. It allows them to compare voter data to ensure individuals aren't registered in multiple states. But as our Charlotte Scott reports, some Republicans say Texas should no longer be a member of this group.
Texas voter data is shared with 31 other states. That's because Texas is a member of the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. It ensures there aren't voters registered in two places at once.
It's been, helpful and necessary in making sure that our administration of elections is more safe and secure.
Katya Erisman is with the voting rights organization Common Cause Texas. She worries that elections will be less secure if Texas withdraws from ERIC.
It poses a danger to voter fraud, to having less integrity of our voter rolls, and the point is that we know that ERIC is tested.
Potentially sharing too much information about Texans.
A bill by Houston area Representative J.C. Jaton would put an expiration date on the state's participation in ERIC. Texas would need to create their own alternative cross-check program. Erisman says other states like Kansas and Florida that have left ERIC have seen worse voter list maintenance and data integrity with their own interstate verification system.
We haven't seen any defense of these alternatives and how they would be secure or safe or better for our lists.
ERIC requires states to send out mailers to households that have an eligible voter who's not registered. Some Republicans don't like this.
Do you have concerns that you're sending cards to people who appear to be eligible, but perhaps they're not a citizen, or you don't realize they're a felon in some other state that's not part of ERIC?
I do understand the concerns and criticisms there. I will say that's one of the reasons that we household it. We don't put a person's name on there.
There's just a lot of...
Republicans also asked questions about rumors ERIC sells and shares data. Christina Adkins with the Secretary of State's office testified that she's not aware of this happening. And the executive director of ERIC, Shane Hamlin, says that's misinformation.
So we are very careful with the data we have, and we protect it, and we do not violate the laws that govern it.
Last night,
the Senate's version of this bill was approved and has been sent to the House. The Secretary of State has also shown interest in leaving ERIC. For Capitol Tonight, I'm Charlotte Scott.
Another election bill that's advancing could mean state troopers might be present the next time you vote. The Senate's endorsed a plan to create election marshals that would have the power to intervene in local elections if they believe an election administrator is violating the law. Opponents say it could lead to state police possibly being dispatched for partisan reasons. The bill now moves to the House. The Texas House advanced a bill today that would remove books from school libraries if they're considered harmful or sexually explicit. It would also require parental consent for some books containing sexual references. If passed, book vendors would have to assign ratings to books based on the presence of depictions or references to sex. Supporters of the bill say kids shouldn't have access to inappropriate material at school, but opponents argue the definitions are too vague and will lead to the removal of classic and diverse literature. The bill now heads to the Senate. Joining us now to discuss the bill further is its author, Representative Jared Patterson of Frisco. Nice to see you. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Why do you think this book is necessary? Why do you think, or this bill is necessary? Why do you think it's needed?
Well, it's needed because adults haven't been doing the right thing. We've got radically sexually explicit content in our public school libraries where minors go in unaccompanied from their parents. And we needed to pass a law to make sure that they're protected just as they are in curriculum, just as they are in sexual education, just as they are in television, radio, and in the movies.
Critics say it's too vague. As mentioned, it could lead to removing classic and diverse literature. I mean, how do you make sure that doesn't happen? Yeah,
one of the provisions in the bill make sure that we exclude curriculum. So anything that would be like Catcher in the Rye or one of the classic literature pieces, we wanted to make sure that those are protected. That curriculum standard also protects religious texts. So we're not trying to ban books or ban classical literature. We're talking about radically sexually explicit content in our public schools.
So you're saying Catcher in the Rye, I know Lonesome Dove has also come up a little bit. Those would be safe?
Yeah, as long as it's part of the curriculum, it meets the TEKS, meets the curriculum standards, and those could remain in our public schools.
On the floor, you tighten the language. You did get some Democrats to support this bill. I mean, are you committed to keeping it the same way as passed off of the floor as it moves forward?
Absolutely. We put some tighter guardrails up just to make sure that the TEA and the book vendors clearly understood what we meant by sexually explicit. We do tie in the penal code definitions. We believe that we've got a very straightforward and narrow definition to protect our kids.
With that being said, there are some legal experts, some librarians who say that they're concerned that this could restrict the learning and growth of students whose experiences might not be included in some of the books or the books that are being removed. I mean, what's your response to that?
Yeah, the First Amendment protects different backgrounds and beliefs. You cannot remove any literature based on background or belief or the content, but the Supreme Court did state in both majority and minority opinions that obscenity, that pervasively vulgar material, and that educationally unsuitable material is not protected by the First Amendment. So I think we've got a pretty good bill that will meet those legal challenges.
What about the concerns of this targeting LGBTQ Texans? Because we've heard that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is I've challenged nearly 36 books in my home school district of Frisco ISD, taken it all the way to the school board. Heterosexual sex, homosexual sex, incest. There was one book that depicted cartoon images with a woman. I mean, it's unbelievable what's out there. The one common denominator, though, is just graphically sexually explicit material.
I do want to ask you, because the Senate passed its priority school library bill, which is a little bit different. I mean, do you see this being kind of a combination of the two, or do you think both will pass individually?
Yeah, so I'm carrying that bill in the House. I'm the sponsor of that bill in the House, and we're going to make sure that those bills work in conjunction to protect Texas school children. I don't think that's going to be a problem at all.
How do you see this kind of moving forward then as you come together and with what's left in the last few weeks that we have of the legislature?
Yeah, we've got 5 or 6 weeks left in the Texas House and Senate. I think that we're going to come together and that we're going to have bills move through both chambers that protect Texas school children. And again, it also adds this parental empowerment piece. So parents are going to be in control of what their kids check out so long as the book is allowed to be there. The only ones that aren't, radically sexually explicit content.
Representative Jared Patterson, we'll have to leave it there. We'll get you back on. Thank you so much for stopping by. The Texas House approved expanding Medicaid coverage for new moms. The measure would let new mothers stay on Medicaid for up to a year after giving birth. Currently, postpartum coverage expires after 2 months in Texas. The state legislature passed a compromise bill last session to cover new moms for 6 months, but federal officials blocked it from taking effect, saying they would review the measure. At the time, some state lawmakers said that was due to language that could exclude pregnant women who get abortions. The Biden administration is moving to expand Obamacare and Medicaid to hundreds of thousands of young adults known as Dreamers, undocumented immigrants who were brought to the U.S. years ago as children. Some Dreamers living and working in Texas say it's a move long overdue. Our Washington reporter Rena Diamante profiles one such Dreamer.
The minute I did one of the ride-outs on the ambulance, it was just like, I knew.
Jesus Contreras was inspired in high school to become an EMT. He's now a 29-year-old paramedic in the Houston area who was on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. But as an undocumented immigrant, he's ineligible for federally funded health insurance himself.
We are productive people in this country, and we help other people in this country. And so we do deserve to have health care. We do deserve to have happy, healthy lives.
The Biden administration is finalizing a proposal to extend Medicaid and Affordable Care Act coverage to hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants who are enrolled in DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. DACA recipients were brought to the U.S. as children and are now allowed to live and work in the country without fear of deportation.
DACA recipients contribute so much to our communities, to our economy. Many of them, especially during the pandemic, served on the front lines as healthcare workers.
The White House says it's long past time for Congress to establish a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients.
These folks are chipping into the system, and to be shorting them on getting them health insurance is just wrong. Healthcare is a human right, and immigration is actually a good thing for our community. And so in Congress, we should be passing permanent protections.
The GOP now controls the House, and some Texas Republicans have told Spectrum News the problem at the border must be addressed first before larger discussions of immigration reform. Some Democrats aren't surprised if this new move will face criticism.
It's just more games, just more a way to just further drag out the divisiveness around this issue instead of looking for real solutions. I think that we can do all of those things.
COVID didn't stop him, and he tells me he plans to keep working despite the uncertainty of DACA's future.
Being an undocumented, you don't know when to quit or to stop. You just find ways to work around issues and problems.
The Biden administration is trying to preserve DACA through federal regulation, and that is being litigated as well. In Washington, Rena Diamante, Capital Tonight.
Rena, thank you. The U.S. House voted today to pass a bill banning transgender athletes from women's sports. The GOP-led bill would impact sports programs at federally funded schools. The Democratic-controlled Senate is not expected to take it up, and the White House has issued a veto threat. So the bill has little chance of actually becoming law, but the vote shows Republicans spotlighting the issue. The Texas Senate approved a similar measure last month. Still to come on Capitol Tonight, banning diversity programs in public universities, where the controversial bill stands in the state legislature. Plus, Supreme Court deadline. A legal expert joins us to discuss what the justice's 48-hour delay on an abortion pill ruling could signal. You're watching Capitol Tonight. Welcome back. Let's get a check now of some of the other political stories making headlines across the state. The state Senate greenlit a bill to ban diversity offices in public universities. Schools would also have to end mandatory diversity training and stop considering diversity in hiring practices. Opponents say the bill would curb efforts to make schools more diverse and correct past discrimination, but others claim DEI programs impose political beliefs on students and faculty and prioritize social justice over merit. The measure heads to the House, where members have been more muted about it. Senators passed another bill on higher education, this one taking aim at tenure. Under the legislation, state colleges wouldn't be allowed to grant tenure to any more professors. Those who already have tenure or who are on the tenure track would not be affected. And bills being considered by the Texas legislature would add 2 new statewide courts. One bill would create a new court specifically to handle cases involving the state and overseen by 5 judges. Another would handle cases over business transactions larger than $10 million with 7 judges appointed by the governor. The business court proposal hasn't passed either chamber, but the Senate approved the state court bill. The clock is ticking toward a Friday deadline for the U.S. Supreme Court to decide the fate of access to an abortion pill. The High Court extended access to the drug mifepristone yesterday to give it more time to consider the case. The move stems from a court ruling a week ago from a Texas federal judge. He found the FDA improperly approved mifepristone in 2000, essentially revoking the drug's approval. The Justice Department asked the High Court to immediately step in and block the lower court ruling while the case plays out. And joining us now to discuss this extension further is Joanna Grossman. She's a law professor at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Welcome back to the program, Professor. Thanks for being with us. First off, hi, what can we read anything into this delay, this extra 48 hours the Supreme Court is taking?
I think we can assume that there is some level of dispute, and the question is in which direction, right? So most likely somebody is writing an opinion to go with whatever decision the court makes on the stay. So that could be that the court is going to extend the stay or grant the stay, and somebody is writing a dissent, or it could be that the court is going to deny the stay and someone is writing a dissent. Those would obviously be very drastically different outcomes, but I think all we probably can guess reasonably is that they don't agree about the right handling of this case right now.
What's the likelihood of a delay even further?
I think it's unlikely that there'll be an additional administrative stay, which is what this current phase is. I do think they will make some more definitive ruling on whether the FDA approval will remain in place pending full resolution of the case. And because it's a little odd that they gave a specific time on a Friday night that they're going to decide, or that it's extended to. So I think probably we'll know something on Friday night.
With that, I know that we're talking about just kind of the idea to block the lower court ruling while the case proceeds. What about the case eventually ending up at the U.S. Supreme Court and the merits of this? I know we've talked about this before, but what's your take on this reaching the high court yet again?
I mean, I have to think that the court probably does not want to reach this case on the merits because it's such a bad case for a variety of reasons. It would require them to really dig not just into abortion law at all, but into the entire structure for regulating FDA approval of drugs, the entire standing doctrine about who has a sufficient kind of injury that allows them to sue over the validity of a law. So I would have to guess that even regardless of which side the justices are on abortion, that probably a lot of them would like to not weigh in on this case on the merits. But I think how they handle the stay will probably give us a little bit of insight into their appetite for that.
Yeah, I mean, with what you're saying and just the FDA involvement with this, do you think that sways people one way or the other because this is a conservative court and it's the issue of abortion?
Yeah, I think it absolutely has to sway them. I mean, for them to ultimately, let's say, go along with what this federal district court has done would basically unsettle the entire framework for approval of drugs in this country. This is a pro-business court. This is a pro-commerce court. I have to think that the conservatives would be pretty hesitant to go in that direction because of that, while the liberals would be hesitant to go in that direction because of the specific impact on abortion access.
Lastly, Professor Grossman, with this lawsuit playing out, I mean, what could this mean for care for Texans? Obviously, Texans are having to go out of state for any kind of abortion care, and we're hearing from some of these other states just about the medication abortion and the access to that right now.
So if the opinion is allowed to take effect pending the full resolution, it's going to massively disrupt the availability of abortion pills. And that, even in a state like Texas where abortion is mostly not legal, is going to have spillover effects because the wait times and access to get to out-of-state clinics are going to go up exponentially. So I think it's going to become that much harder for everybody to access abortion, adding on top of whatever existing burdens they have.
Professor Joanna Grossman, we will get you back on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The chairman of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is asking Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts to appear before the committee for a hearing on high court ethics rules. Senator Dick Durbin made the request in a letter Thursday and says Roberts could instead send a justice of his choosing. He has also said he doesn't plan to subpoena Roberts if he declines. This comes after a ProPublica report showed Dallas-based GOP megadonor Harlan Crow paid for luxury trips with Justice Clarence Thomas. Thomas says he didn't list them in his financial filings on advice from colleagues. Still ahead on Capitol tonight, a joint effort on Capitol Hill to reform cannabis policy, why some lawmakers say it's high time Congress decriminalized marijuana. President Biden is expected to announce his re-election bid next week. The president's team is working to finalize plans to release a video to officially launch his campaign. That video could be released as early as next Tuesday, the 4-year anniversary of his 2020 campaign launch. For months, Biden has signaled he plans to run for a second term, but has held off on an official announcement. With support for legalizing marijuana at a record high, lawmakers in Washington from both parties are calling for ending federal restrictions on the drug. They chose a day with special significance to make their pitch, April 20th, or 420, celebrated by cannabis users around the world. Reuben Jones has more from Washington.
It's not a sight you'd expect to see in the U.S. Capitol just a few years ago. Lawmakers, Republicans included, calling for cannabis reform.
The amount of conversation, the amount of activity is actually really grown.
As has support for legalization nationally. A November Gallup poll found 68% of Americans support marijuana legalization. That's up 20% from a decade ago. The poll found more than half of Republicans, as well as Democrats, want reform. But Congress remains the biggest roadblock.
It's time for Congress to move on cannabis reform.
A group of Republican and Democratic lawmakers took part in a summit on Capitol Hill Thursday with that same message. A number of cannabis reform bills have gone nowhere, but last week, lawmakers renewed a push, introducing a bipartisan bill, the PREPARE Act, to develop a framework for legalization at the federal level.
Brings together all the people who are opposed, people pro, district attorneys, scientists. PREPARE Act allows us to have those discussions with people that so far have just been saying, no, I don't want to talk about decriminalizing, legalizing, any of it.
There's a process that needs to play out, but there has to be an arm twisting to get the people to participate in the process.
President Joe Biden ran on decriminalizing weed, and while he has commuted sentences of low-level drug offenders, marijuana remains illegal federally.
We've been optimistic, yet still, there's a lot in the advocacy community that really has been disappointed.
While marijuana legislation has stalled in Congress, legalization on the local level is moving forward. Recreational use of marijuana for adults is legal in 21 states, plus right here in the District of Columbia. In Washington, Reuben Jones, Capitol Tonight.
Reuben, thank you. And that is going to do it for this edition of Capitol Tonight. We are back tomorrow with the latest in Texas politics. Until then, thanks for watching. Stay safe and have a great night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. And for more refreshing stories about your community, click the subscribe button right over here. You can also download our Spectrum News app to get live news coverage, weather alerts, and more wherever you are. And don't forget to tune in to Channel 55 on Dish and DirecTV for live local reporting every single day. We'll see you then.